Hi, I am wondering how everyone is doing. Um, this is day 4 of um, doing these live videos around this time. I put 6 and then I changed it to 6:15. So just in case you noticed that, you're not crazy. It was originally 6. Um, Thanks for your patience. And anyway, if you are watching and you want to say hi, that's cool. Um, Thanks for watching. So these mental health tools I developed for myself over the years, I guess, doing a lot of reading and a lot of therapy and um, just trying to absorb as much as I could from different teachers. So that's kind of where I'm getting them. And so I didn't make anything up myself. Like I'm not creating these. They're either directly from something I've read or watched, or I'm adapting them. And so I'll try to always give you the resources that I'm referencing. And like, I definitely always recommend like going to the original source and, reading the original thing that I got it from. When it comes to soothing your inner child, which is what I'm going to talk about today, this is truly the very best tool. Oh, I think I said that last night. They're all okay. They're all so vital to my mental health. I want to give you a little bit of background about like my own mental health journey, which is that I have struggled with major depressive disorder, which is a severe mental illness. I've been diagnosed several times by different psychiatrists, so I'm not. This isn't me saying like, oh, sometimes I'm sad. I have actually a diagnosed severe mental illness, major depressive disorder. And so I've had to work really, really hard to kind of claim my happiness in this world and to find different coping strategies and to also get to the heart of my depression and understand why can't I just feel feelings like a normal person, or like how come I don't know how to do this, and like what are other people doing that I'm not doing. And so that's like the perspective that I'm bringing with me, that I'm coming with. 1 out of 5 people in the United States, I know not all of you live in the US, but 1 out of 5 people in the US get diagnosed with a mental illness every year. So, and that's just people who get diagnosed. And so I know a lot of other people struggle with mental health issues and don't get diagnosed. So there's a lot of us who struggle to kind of find like a normal rhythm with our moods and emotions so that we can show up every day and it doesn't just feel like chaos or despair. And so, yeah, that's why I'm doing this video series, is just because I have had to work really hard at learning each and every one of these tools that helps me feel just a little bit more sane, And so I would say where my depression is at now is that I would say that whereas the thoughts in my head used to be really, really dark, like every day, now it's probably just 1 or 2 times a month. So that's such a huge change for me. So when I'm offering these tools to you, I guess it's coming from a place of like, these changed my life from like dark thoughts almost every day to dark thoughts almost never. And so that's where I'm coming from, is like, they work. They're part of the strategy. So, right now we're really being challenged because a few things, right? We're having to sort of stay indoors. We're having to break our routine. That's huge for mental health. We're also like really worried, like what is this pandemic? Like, we've all seen different apocalypse films, so we kind of have this thing in our head of like, is this the end of the world? Like, are zombies going to attack? Like, what's going to happen? And then it's like, are people going to die? Like, I know people who have have compromised immune systems or are elderly. Like, are they going to die? And then, healthcare workers, like, are they safe? So there's just right now, like more than ever, there's just like all of these triggers and they're really intense. So I just wanted to offer some of the tools that I've learned on my own journey. And if, I'm just going to do like a different tool each night or a different thought. And then if they're helpful, like that's kind of my only wish, is like to help people during this really intense time, like just a little bit. I feel like my laptop's a little slanty. Is that better? Okay, if you want to say hi, you can say hi if you're watching. So I wanted to get into this inner child stuff because oftentimes when a really intense emotion arises, what we have to recognize is that something from an emotional memory has been triggered, and what's happening is that your mind is wanting you to resolve that original conflict. And we, as adults, unless we've kind of done this work, sometimes it can be called family of origin work or reparenting work. If we haven't done it before, we can get really confused as to why we're all of a sudden having this explosive experience. Like maybe like with our partner, all of a sudden something happens and we're so triggered way more than we feel that we should. Like, how dare they not know that I like the toilet paper, with the face on top. And all of a sudden you're like in this anger spiral of like, how they know I like my toilet paper that way, and how dare they? And, and all of a sudden like the anger's up here when they were just like half asleep last night and just put the toilet paper on that wasn't even about you, right? But now you've made it personal. And so my example is kind of silly, but right, like we all know what I'm talking about, like where it's like this small, tiny thing, and all of a sudden our anger is just like, shoo, and they don't even love me, they don't care about me, they know what I like and need. And so, some of the things can be a little more, or a little less trivial than toilet paper, but you guys get it. So there's all of these situations. So that one's for anger, but like for shame, that one can be a little sneakier. So maybe, I'll just throw this one out there, even though none of us can go to yoga classes, but maybe you're at a yoga class and you see someone and they're just way more fit than you are, and they're doing all the poses right, and all of a sudden you're in a shame spiral about, oh, well, my body's not perfect enough, and if my body was perfect, then I could do yoga better, and I would look better in my yoga pants, and gosh, like I look like I'm homeless, like where did I get my clothes? And they have the newest Lululemon, and pretty soon like we're in the shame spiral that's kind of about like, I'm just not good enough, I'm not worthy to be here, I can't do anything right. So so that's like a shame one about I'm not good enough. Another big one that comes up a lot is embarrassment. And I want to talk about why embarrassment comes up so much. And this is because we are social creatures. That's why this social isolation thing is really tough, is because we are wired to be social. There was never a time on this planet when there was only one human. We've always been in tribes and always been around others. So we just like to be around others. And so embarrassment is when we kind of do something that maybe violates the greater social contract. And so as we are developing as humans from childhood and into adulthood, embarrassment is the signal that to our bodies, because it has a body sensation to it, it's the signal that maybe we're doing something that's not quite socially acceptable to the larger group. And it can be really helpful because then we can modify our behavior a little bit and fit in better with the group. And not all of society's rules are good for us. As a life coach, one of the biggest things that I help clients do is like figure out what they're conforming to that's not working for them anymore, like family rules or society rules and lots of shoulds and have-tos that aren't good. But a lot of rules are good. Like right now we're encountering like wash your hands, right? So wash your hands is a societal rule that keeps us all safe from germs. And so we may be growing up and a kid may pick on us for having dirty hands or something, or looking not clean. And then we feel embarrassed. We feel the emotion of embarrassment in our body. And that signals to us, oh, I need to do this thing that society's doing. And then as a result of that emotion of embarrassment, we have a society in which germs are not spread as often or as much. So a lot of these situations in which we feel these strong emotions, especially embarrassment, actually have a greater purpose of like keeping the society happy and healthy as a whole. And so it's super, super important to kind of think about the role. I mean, emotions are largely a mystery. There's a great free course on Coursera about the philosophy of emotions, because there's so much we don't know about why we experience them. But a lot of them have to do with maintaining social order, okay? And so I guess I want to also say, like, you may be watching this and thinking, well, like, why should I care about how I'm feeling? Like, I'll just not care. But a lot of research shows that people who ignore their emotional response or their fight or flight response will then have higher rates of chronic illness later in life. Okay, so you may think that you can just ignore your emotional experience or what you're feeling, but those feelings are they're gonna catch up with you eventually. So there's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and he is at BU, where I just did my MPH, and that book explains the biology of how it is that stress and emotions get stored in our body and come out as disease later in life. And this is the field that I now work in. I work in a field called adverse childhood experiences. And so with adverse childhood experiences, there was a study done in 1998 in which they looked at people in San Diego and noticed that people who had a higher adverse childhood experiences score, and this is 10 items related to physical abuse as a child experiencing this, neglect, emotional abuse or neglect, sexual abuse, having a parent with a substance misuse disorder, or having a parent inflict violence on one of the other parents, or having a parent go to jail. So there's 10 ACEs, and the higher your ACEs score, the more likely you are to be at risk for literally any health outcome you can think of, from substance misuse, so what we commonly call addiction, to heart disease, diabetes, like anything you can think of. And in fact, with this current outbreak, I promise you that there is a correlation between a high ACEs score and your ability to manage and cope with the virus if you catch it. And that's because toxic levels of stress in childhood have a physiological impact on your body. So, so all of this is to say, we actually cannot just ignore our emotions, and we cannot just ignore the emotions that our inner child may be wanting us to heal. So they will catch up with us. But the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful news is that all of the wounds that we have are healable. And so my ACEs score out of 10 is not 0. So it's a number between 1 and 10, okay? And even having just an ACEs score of 1 puts me at greater risk of many different health outcomes. I encourage you to Google what's my ACEs score. You may end up at the website where I work, which is acesconnection.com. But there's also a resilience score, and new research is being done on different resilience factors. Like if you had people that really cared about you and believed in you, then that's going to help your health as well. So it's not all bad. I'm going to share an exercise that you can do whenever you feel yourself experiencing what I said at the beginning of this webinar, was just triggered beyond the situation, beyond what's being called for in the moment. Something that seems pretty minor, or even something major. To be honest, as adults, we don't actually have to freak out. What that freaking out thing is actually the feeling of not feeling safe. I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. I need to fight or flee and I need to fight my way out of this, and it's not going to be okay, right? And so as adults, we actually do have all the tools at hand to care for ourselves and our needs. And no matter how dire the situation, it's going to be okay. In fact, that would be a good activity to do in tomorrow's video, the anxiety activity. I hope I remember to do that. I have a good anxiety one. But no matter how dire, you are safe. Like, you're not going to die, hopefully. You know, and so in most of these situations, you're not going to die. So, and no matter how bad it gets, even if you're broke and living on the street, like, you're still going to be okay, right? But what's being triggered is an old feeling of not feeling safe when you're a child, because children cannot take care of all of their own needs. Rely on the support of an adult caregiver to feel safe and able to go about in the world. So we don't come out of the womb fully formed. It takes our brains a long time. Actually, our brains don't finish developing until age 25 or 26. So as young children, especially as very young children, we're so dependent on care. And if anything goes wrong, even if it's not our caregiver's fault, you know, something like this disaster is probably going to have an impact because it's very stressful. But other natural disasters like Hurricane Katrina, for example, is no one's fault, but now you've added this sort of natural disaster, you've added a lot of stress into households. So if you're a young child and you've experienced something like this, then you're going to have higher levels of stress as your brain is developing. And so this is why we have legacies of trauma. And so, you know, people in the United States who are descendants of slaves, of former enslaved people, have, you know, a particularly very heavy trauma that they're dealing with, in addition to the racism that still exists. People who are descendants of American Indians are going to have a lot of trauma, a lot of inherited, like a legacy of trauma. So I guess I just want to acknowledge that the reasons that people grow up in homes that have high adverse childhood experiences or high levels of trauma or high levels of toxic stress, I don't think it's necessarily fair to point any fingers like they were a bad parent. There's so many reasons of inherited legacies of trauma and in different family lines that create these situations. And the important thing to focus on is what we can do now to heal. And so it was not your fault, whatever happened. Maybe you had a parent with a drinking problem, or a parent with an unstable income, or you got spanked a lot as a kid, very traumatic, or there was a threat of physical violence, or there was actually, you know, even greater physical violence. So, you know, none of those things were your fault, although children tend to internalize those things. But it is our responsibility as adults, if we can get there and we can get that awareness, to actively and diligently practice healing these, because we don't want to be re-traumatizing people all the time and flying into a rage and getting angry, and my coworker said this, and my partner's such an asshole, and they did this to me. That is hell. That is hell. And we want to get to this place of just such inner peace and just feeling so okay on the inside. And that takes diligent daily practice to notice our triggers and to go, okay, let me stop my reaction and notice this trigger and check in with my inner child and ask what she, for me, needs, okay? And so, let's see, here's the tool. Let's do the tool. It was a 20-minute intro. Thanks for watching. I hope this is useful. And so, what you want to do is notice a trigger. And so I'm going to try and think of a trigger. Okay, so this past weekend, I was sick. Maybe I got coronavirus. It's very contagious and it's going around right now, so it's possible. Or maybe I got a different flu. We'll never know. I wasn't able to get a test. I had a high fever for about 2.5 days. And it was pretty intense. And I was laying in my bed and just kind of projecting my current reality onto forever. And so I was like, the world is, it's the apocalypse and it's terrible, and all these things that I had been looking forward to and wanting in my head, they were just all coming to an end, and everything was really bleak. And I was reading the news, and that was just awful. And so I want to tap into, for the sake of this exercise, that if I were to, and I did do this actually, even though I had a fever, I was able to self-soothe. This is all about soothing our inner child. I was able to pause and go, okay, I noticed the thoughts whirling around really fast. I noticed those thoughts just, and they're all really bad, and they're all putting me in this spiral, this negative downward spiral of despair. And I noticed that. I've noticed that I'm doing that, and I'm just going to slow things down, and I'm going to check in with my inner child. Okay, so what's the core feeling here? Well, I guess I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. And when I breathe into that, I can tap into some really deep past experiences as a child of not feeling safe. And there could be limitless times that we didn't feel safe as children, because that's just tough. We can't take care of our needs. We really can't. And so that as we're trying to navigate the world, there's just all these experiences. I even have had adult experiences. So not in my developmental years, but adult experiences that have triggered me to have kind of PTSD around not feeling safe. And so I can sit with that and go, which younger version of me is needing my attention right now? Which wound wants to be seen? So the first thing that comes up to me is an image of riding the bus when I'm in kindergarten. And there was this moment where I was like in the back seat with some older kids, even though I was in kindergarten, and I had won this chocolate bunny for Easter, and they wanted to eat my chocolate bunny, and I think that they did. And it's so funny that image popped up, because it's not really that incident itself, but I think it's like a whole bunch of feelings from that time period of trying to navigate interactions with others and not feeling like I was able to. And I think it was maybe around that time that my parents were going through a divorce. So my guess is, even though I can't remember, they may not have been as emotionally available at that time as they would have been able to be at other times for me. So as a child, you'll get home from school and you'll be really upset. And it's the caregiver's job to soothe and say, tell me what's wrong. Oh, I'm going to listen to you. Did you feel afraid? What will you do next time? It's okay to feel afraid. Yeah, next time, why don't you sit up at the front of the bus? Or next time, why don't you say no? Was that a scary experience for you? And then kind of comfort and pat, right? And there's so many reasons why caregivers might not be able to do that. Maybe they don't know how. No one ever did it for them. And maybe they were at work. A lot of us grew up with two working parents, or maybe they were having their own difficult emotional experience and they were not emotionally available at that time. Okay, and so there's infinite times when you could go back and think, wow, my little self was really scared and sad and did not get the comfort or soothing that she needed. And so now in this exercise, I'm just going to go back in time and imagine 5-year-old me, 6-year-old me, feeling unsafe and afraid. And I'm going to imagine myself giving little me the comfort that I needed then. So if you want to join me right now and choose an emotion. Maybe it's fear like mine, and tap into it. Feel what that feels like in the body. We can do a couple breaths where you are feeling some intense emotion that has come up for you today. And just breathe with it. And maybe a version of your inner child has come up for you. And so you're seeing younger you. And so for me, it's 6-year-old me, feeling a little bit lonely and a little bit afraid and a little bit unsure what to do. And I'm going to say, hey, little Allie, it's okay to feel afraid. But you're safe. And now what you want to do is just imagine the strongest version of yourself, the version of yourself that you are impressed with, that always comes through. Take a moment to think about that version of you. When was the last time that you really, really came through for yourself? Maybe a really proud moment. And bring in that version of yourself. And remember that that version of yourself is also you. You have the wounded child, and then you have the version of yourself that's so strong and capable. And you just want to touch in with both of those, and they both exist. And that strong, capable version of you that you trust so much, imagine that version of you being there for your younger, wounded self that didn't feel safe. And imagine yourself bringing in that safety into that old situation and offering it to your younger self. This can be a visualization of distinct figures, or it can be more of a feeling. It can be more subtle. And so go ahead and breathe into that. And you can say something like to yourself, like, I'm so proud of you for getting through this. That was really hard and confusing at that time. And look how strong you are now. So, as you can see, this brings up some intense emotions. And there were infinite moments in our childhoods when we felt out of control or confused or not safe. Infinite. And it's no one's fault, right? But if we don't go back and check on our little inner child, our inner child is going to keep throwing tantrums. And that gets annoying and kind of old, you know? So, you know, for me, my coping strategy was just to numb out. Okay, and that's why I used hard drugs when I was a teenager and did lots of parties and raves in my 20s, is because I felt so numb. I didn't want to acknowledge any of these feelings because they were so painful. I just shut them all off. Okay, so maybe you're like, well, I don't have strong emotions. Well, maybe you're not feeling your emotions. So there's lots and lots of different ways that your inner wounded child is asking for your attention. And so some of them can be very externally facing of wild, rampant emotions and tantrums. And then some of them can be way over on the other side where you're just numbing out and you're like, I don't even care. But as I explained earlier in the video, thank you, Samantha, thank you. Those emotions are gonna come out in your body eventually. And so right now, in the midst of a health epidemic, is actually, despite all the stress, an amazing opportunity to think about how stress impacts our health. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was useful. If you are able to slow down and practice this in the little moments, even just a tiny amount, 1% more a day, and you just keep doing it, you will see a difference in your life. Maybe not tomorrow or the next day, but like I've been doing this very, very diligently for about 4 years, and the results have been miraculous. So it could be years, but it's like it does get better really quickly, like it really does. Just do a little bit at a time. And so like the mantra that I always use when I don't feel like doing the work and I just want to be lazy is that I just say to myself, this is a diligent daily practice. So diligent, rather than calling it discipline or like willpower, it's just diligence. If I'm diligent and I do it every day, I'm gonna get the results I want. And it's not about being harsh to myself. It's about meeting myself with compassion and just going, this is a diligent practice. This is my diligent daily practice. So I'm going to do this right now, even though I don't feel like it. So I hope that helps too. And tune in tomorrow. I will do another one. And I hope that you all are doing okay amidst this kind of weird, uncertain time.